you want to have the support of the facts and the numbers and the logic be watertight. But when you boil it down, it is that intuition that's like, okay, that's why we are doing this. What it truly means to be human and to be focusing education and the work we do in areas that we are really creating, that we are really doing what is human, I think is what we should be, focusing. It's also things like passion. Like this is their life's work. The best talents are the ones that just love playing with technology, whether it's software or hardware, they just enjoying doing that.
Hey everyone, and welcome to The Essence of Investing, where we explore the stories, strategies, wit, and wisdom of investors from across the Asia region and beyond. I'm your host, Jonathan Reckman. My guest today is the one and only Chee-We Ng, partner at Oakseed Ventures, which invests in early-stage enterprise technologies from AI and cybersecurity to next-generation compute. In this episode, Chee-We shares stories from his early days as a coder in middle school, his strategy for evaluating technical founders, and a ton of wisdom about making hard trade-offs, listening to our inner voices, and realizing distinctive value as human beings in the age of AI. Please listen, like, share, give feedback, and most of all, enjoy. The Essence of Investing is powered by Next Level Communication and by the world of allocators. Next Level Communication helps investors and multinational executives in Asia tell their stories to their most important global stakeholders. Get in touch at reachnextlevel.net to learn more about cross-border IR, strategic communication, and presentation training services. The world of allocators encourages long-term thinking and the adoption of the endowment approach among asset managers in China. Get in touch to join our community of domestic and overseas practitioners to share and learn. All right, thank you so much, Chee-We, for joining us on the podcast. So excited to have you with us today. Yeah. And I wanted to kick off with a look at where you got started. And when we were speaking earlier, you told me, you're a very technical fund. That's kind of part of the sharp edge of your spear is technical expertise. And you said that you started coding as a child. And I wanted to ask how you got into coding as a child, what coding was like then, and what your early fascination with technology and programming was.
In middle school, this was the first time actually our middle school decided that instead of learning woodwork, we would learn programming. So to put it in the context, this is during the days of the IBM PC when Windows hasn't showed up yet. This is MS-DOS. And so we were learning, to do interesting things with Visual Basic, to solve simple problems. And then I really got into it one day when our programming teacher wrote a simple program to do the class planning. And this is a laborious thing if you had to do it by hand, which is, there are X number of teachers in, math, science, history, geography, and what have you. And then they will teach, class A and B and C. And then you have to figure out this problem of like, okay, how do you, when school starts to when school ends, you have a problem of, okay, you need to have 3 science classes a week and, 3 reading classes a week. And then how do you slot all of that in? And I was fascinated. I was like, oh, wow, you can use computers to do that. And it was a simple, basic program that our teacher wrote to solve that.
How old were you and where were you at that time?
I was in Singapore. So I was 12 going 13, and this was grade 7.
And do you remember the first time that you wrote a piece of code or that you found that empowerment, the ability to create something or to save time or to create value, even though maybe as a child you didn't think of it in those terms, but the realization that with just your fingers and this keyboard, you could make something that didn't exist and do something that you couldn't do before?
Yeah, and so I think the first real challenge that I took upon myself was after having learned some programming and all that, was observing that my mother was facing some challenges at home using WordStar and WordPerfect. And so this is way before Microsoft Word. And some people may remember that you have all these funny keystrokes. Even copy and paste wasn't that straightforward. And certainly there was no, the other editor that MS-DOS provided, Microsoft provided, was an editor called Edlin, which is command-based. It's just a nightmare. And I looked at my poor mother. She's like, okay, what do I do to copy and paste again? And it was incredibly hard. And I was like, okay, what can I do to solve that? And then I realized that you couldn't do that in GW Basic because GW Basic is an interpreted language. I needed to learn a language that you can compile. And then so I went to the bookstore. I asked my dad to buy me a book on Turbo C. And we bought a copy of the Turbo C compiler. And then I learned about how a screen works and how do you display things on the screen. And then I learned about in C, how do you do data structures and, how do you capture input like, left key and right key. And I decided that I was going to write my mother a word processor. It was very simple, but it allowed her to not have to do funny keystrokes in order to copy and paste, and allowed her to save, allowed her to, make things bold and underline. And that was it. But I made the decision to really alleviate her of, pulling hairs and all that. And then there was a lot to learn, but, that can be motivated. And then spend many hours in front of a computer and figure out, oh, this is actually how you would compile a program, and there you go. So I think it was probably second year in middle school that I got the whole project done, and then my mother never needed to use WordStar or WordPerfect anymore.
Take us forward now in the story. How do you take this early passion for technology and coding and bring it forward as you go on your journey and enter a career in both working in technology and then in finance and investing?
So fast forward, I was very thrilled and delighted that I got admitted to MIT. You can tell I was a very geeky boy, and technology really excites me. I still remember another story, which is we grew up playing with Texas Instruments Speak and Spell. And our Speak and Spell broke. And my dad's a physicist, and he said, okay, well, let me take a look. He soldered a piece of a calculator onto Speak and Spell. I think it probably was a microprocessor or so that he basically piggybacked onto the bus, and it worked. It magically was working. I was like, oh wow, what is this technology? And so when I went to MIT, I was like, oh wow, you mean this is how it works and all that. And it was just like wow, like mind-boggling that all these things are capable of doing different things. So I did my undergraduate. I was admitted to the PhD program. I had actually taken a scholarship from the Singapore government, and so I couldn't finish my PhD program. And the Singapore government said, hey, I started my work in the area of information security. So I started building cybersecurity products, encryption, authentication, devices, and I led a team of software and hardware engineers. And then towards years into that career, I started being exposed to the business side of the world, doing business development and doing partnerships with companies like Schlumberger SEMA, which back then had a smart card company. And so I decided, it's time to maybe do a business school instead. And so I went to Harvard, graduated, and then this was the part that really led me into the business side of the world. I was at McKinsey, and then from McKinsey, I then transitioned into investing.
What was the thesis that you took in your transition from practicing to investing?
At Harvard, this was when I made the decision that eventually I would like to be an investor. Maybe not right away, but this would be something that I would feel incredibly passionate about. At Harvard, as you can imagine, many of my peers are drawn to an investing career because it's very financially rewarding. And when you are surrounded by everyone who, a third of the class comes from Wall Street and a third of the class wants to go to Wall Street, it's almost natural. But I was actually very inspired by some of the people that have walked through the halls of Harvard Business School, Georges Doriot and Arthur Rock in particular. They actually were the first venture capitalists, as you would call it. In particular, I was actually receiving financial aid from the school in the name of Georges Doriot, who was professor. He was actually a general, brigadier general in the US. He was director of planning, military training, and then dean of Harvard Business School, and then actually the founder of INSEAD. They actually created venture capital, I think, between Georges Doriot and Arthur Rock. They have invested in, and created companies like Intel, digital equipment. Truly, I think venture capital is in the business of making the world better, because by allocating capital to these innovators, they create things that otherwise would not be created. It just would not, right? And so venture capitalists have a immensely important role in society.
Tell me about the beginning of your career in investment. How did you begin investing?
I was first recruited to help start the Shanghai office of Arsenal Capital, which is a New York-based mid-market private equity firm. And this was a time that a lot of industries and manufacturing had all these opportunities in China and needed people like me who had consulting background that was at McKinsey, and then kind of understood cross-border challenges and so forth. And so I transitioned from McKinsey into investing with Arsenal Capital, and it was a very educational experience with our partners like Terry Mullen, because Arsenal is a very special private equity firm that values a lot about having focus and having value add. And so investing is not just go pick a good opportunity, but actually knowing what to be investing, having that industry know-how, and then also having impact, having value add to the firm itself. And so not what typically a lot of people think about private equity and buyouts, which is, you acquire a company and then you do financial engineering and then you go flip it and then, that kind of thing. And that had a foundational impact on me in terms of how I think about investing. I then transitioned into venture capital, and this may be surprising to a lot of people, but I was basically also later on recruited into doing venture investments at Cisco. And at Cisco, we wanted to be investing into all the areas across the enterprise technology stack as an effort to broaden Cisco's know-how, experience, and exposure to other areas of enterprise technology other than computer networking. And so there is this corporate venture, strategic venture investing perspective to it, but identifying kind of technology trends and where the disruptive technologies that are coming out and what we should be doing. And so that's how I got into doing this, and that's essentially what we are still doing today. So Oaksy Ventures was founded with colleagues of mine, and we are essentially doing the same thing. We're essentially looking at where the innovations are in. Today we focus exclusively on AI, cybersecurity, and next-generation computing. And we are looking at the innovations that are coming up, the disruptions that are coming up, looking at the pain points in corporates and organizations, and then backing and helping the new founders that we see.
How is it different practicing this investment as a standalone fund, as your own fund, versus as doing it via a corporate? How is your practice at Oaksy different from your practice at Cisco?
So I would point to a few things. One, of course, in a corporate, you never have to worry about fundraising. um, but of course, at a corporate like Cisco, we really care about the technology. We also care about kind of like how is this relevant to Cisco? Now, of course, when I was at Cisco, we kind of like there were things that are close to Cisco's core businesses, which by then, I mean, of course, the computer networking is a very big portion of things, but we also have cybersecurity. We also have collaboration tools like WebEx and others. And so things that are close to core, we tend to think about. So where is the synergy? Is there some sort of strategic fit? But we also define areas that we think are important, to technology players in general, but not necessarily having an immediate intersection with Cisco business. So, for instance, the areas of big data, next generation data warehousing and so forth, areas that were emerging, right, and important to Cisco to understand and so forth. And so in those areas, we think pretty much like a venture capitalist, like, okay, where are these new big things that are happening that will give rise to opportunities where new, potentially huge companies will be created. Now, of course, in a VC firm, you push that to even more, right? Because our responsibility is to create outsized returns for investors, given the risk that you have in VC. And so, and investors are looking to venture capital to create those outside returns. And so that forces us to, think not just about the technology, the market, the dislocations, but financially, whether this would be one of those investments that would deliver that outsized returns.
Tell me a little bit now about Oak Seed Ventures and the strategy and what is unique about your firm, unique about your point of view on the market, on these sectors that you talked about, and your edge.
We back companies in the enterprise technology space when they have little or no product. And what is our edge is we work very hard to have our own perspective on things that is non-public information. And then we essentially also try to de-risk by helping those companies. And so we're very, very focused. As mentioned, we only focus on AI, cybersecurity, and next generation computing. All our partners are fairly technical, and some of us from investing background, some of us actually from industry. And then we share different perspectives from the technology, the business of technology, and then kind of like the financial investing perspective. And we put all of that together, and we are looking for founders that are highly differentiated in terms of their experience in the technology world. And we do a lot of DD ourselves in terms of like figure out if these technologies are at the forefront, not just by looking for things in a checkbox, like things like they worked at a Google or they work at a Qualcomm or they have a PhD from Stanford or MIT, but actually that they have spent time really developing that through technology capabilities. We spend a lot of time thinking about the business of technology, figuring out whether they are solving real pain points. In the technology world, oftentimes one of the pitfalls is that you would be a better mousetrap or a mousetrap looking for the mouse. You don't want that. I mean, Steve Jobs mentioned you want to start with the customer experience and then go figure out what the technology is. It's no different in the enterprise space. You have to find customer pain points, what pain points you're trying to solve. And a database seems to be a database. It's not just like you use different knives for different situations. You really have to find out the use case. You have to really find out the pain points, and then founders that succeed realize where these new opportunities are, these use cases that are not solved by existing technologies, and they create new products and solutions to solve them.
I want to double click on what you described as non-public information. And what sort of information are we talking about, and how do you get it, and why is it valuable?
So let's talk about technology bench of a team. There's one approach that you can do, which is you basically look at the resume and you say, okay, well, this team has the right credentials, have gone to the good schools, done a PhD and or a graduate degree, and then have worked at the right companies. That's public information because that's information that everyone has access to, right? The founders will say, hey, I went to this school, I work for this company. You can go a bit deeper, and then you can go, interview colleagues at the company. You can try to find out what was that real experience and those kinds of things. But we go beyond that. We really quiz the founders in terms of their understanding of the things they are doing. Granted that we obviously, even all of us are fairly technical. We're not, we can't be experts in everything, even though many of us had written code or done engineering work when we were younger. We don't do it, as deeply, now, but we have access to, friends, colleagues, and myself, MLT faculty and others, where we try to, I also spend a lot of time reading technical papers. We try to figure out, okay, so when do things get difficult and challenging? What are the trade-offs that need to be done? And so we have a conversation with typically the CTO or the technical founders is to like, hey, what is difficult here? And why is this so special, right? And granted that, sometimes founders also don't tell us the true secret sauce because obviously it's proprietary and probably we won't be able to understand, all the details about it. But we know fairly enough, where are some of the real difficult challenges, and the founders that are working at that forefront of technology understand limitations of technology, understand, oh, wow, this is really hard. And some of them have chosen to work on those very difficult things because they know if they are able to overcome them, those are huge barriers to entry, right? And so we look out for those. We look out for talent that is not just looks good on paper, because oftentimes it's the best talent need not have gone to the MITs and Stanfords and what have you. The best talents are the ones that just love playing with technology, whether it's software or hardware. They just enjoying doing that since they were very, very young. And you get to know that by interactions like this with them.
So it's really interesting. It sounds like there's this paradox for investors where investors want to invest in people that are smarter than them so that they can, push the boundaries, the frontiers of science and technology and create things that don't exist. If the investors were that smart and that innovative, they would probably, invent technologies themselves. So you want to be, allocating capital to people that are really on another level. But at the same time, you want to understand, you want to be able to do diligence on them and make sure that they really are bringing the goods, that they really do have that intelligence. And so you need some sort of ability to check. And the way that you approach that sounds like is rather than by having all of the answers, you get really smart about what are the questions or what are the challenges or the trade-offs that you described, drawing on your network of science experts to understand where the cutting edge gets blurry, and then quizzing the founders, not on how they solve it, but how they approach that tension or those difficulties. Is that right? How they think about the hard part.
That's exactly right. We are not nearly as smart as them in what they do. My problem statement is not to be as smart or to be smarter, but knowing how to identify the ones, maybe smart is not even the right word. It is having those experience and the ability to do that creation, being the best in that area. And so that's what we are looking for. And there's also, other elements to it. And as I mentioned, it's also things like passion, like this is their life's work. right? So it's not just, oh, this is a gig, but right? This is someone who's like, yes, I've gone through this, I've learned all these things. Now I see this problem, that needs to be fixed, and I have the skills to do it, right? And this is my life's passion now, and the world will be better. And so we look for those drive as well, because at the end of the day, starting a company for starting sake is not the right recipe, right? It's really a life's passion, and they are there at the right time, at the right place, with the right sets of skills, and they're like, yes, I want to do it now. This is the right time to be doing this.
What's the sort of non-public information that you can get that reveals something about a founder's passion or their commitment or their drive or character?
One of the things that we try to do, we don't always succeed, is we try to put them in front of new potential customers. Now that's an amazing win-win, and we do that early on, whether or not we invest, because it's such value creating in many ways, right? Obviously, the founders will be very grateful that there's a new potential customer they can speak with and develop a business. But for us, it's always enlightening to see founders interact with potential customers. Do they receive feedback well? Yeah, right. And this is always an amazing delicate balance, because on one hand you want to have the founders like Steve Jobs at Apple that says, well, okay, the iPhone should have one button and no keyboard, and that's the right decision to make. But on the other hand, you also want to be listening to your customers, right? And oftentimes customers will tell you things that maybe you don't want to hear, right? And so whether you would have the maturity and experience to be dealing with those awkward, difficult situations, you can tell, and this is non-public information, by seeing that injection, right? So you don't get by, hey, give me like reference calls. Everybody can those do reference calls. That's public information, right? So how do you get those non-public information? And you do that by creating opportunities like this.
You mentioned earlier the role of trade-offs in evaluating founders and their perspective on a market. What have you learned about trade-offs? Do you see common trade-offs occurring across different categories? Are there trade-offs that you become familiar with? You're like, it's one of these, one of the familiar cast of characters. And what has it taught you about facing trade-offs in markets, in technology? And then, maybe afterwards we'll talk about what has it taught you about facing trade-offs in life?
So there are different types of trade-offs that technology founders have to make. They could be technology trade-offs, or they could be business trade-offs, or even more broadly speaking, business choices. So let me go down in this different direction. So in technology, there are trade-offs. So let me not use computer science or electrical engineering analogy, because maybe it's hard to understand. But let's just talk about cars and trucks and so forth, right? So it's a truck has an engine that can carry a huge load, right? It may not go very fast, but it has a lot of horsepower, right? And then a racing car, right? A Porsche or what have you, is able to go from 0 to 200 miles an hour, right? Like in 5 seconds, right? And so that's a trade-off, because you can't get a Porsche to pull what a truck pulls, right? In the technology world, lots and lots of trade-offs. So we trade off performance, like throughputs. We trade off what we call latencies. We trade off with power. These days, power is such an issue, right? Because it's not just climate change and all that. It's just all these racks it's just not enough power to like drive these things, right? And data centers and so forth. So lots of trade-offs. And the most experienced architects and engineers are dealing with those trade-offs. And it's because these trade-offs exist that there are different products and different niches or different segments that you can go after, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all. You have knives for different purposes, which is good. But when you are at the forefront, you know what you're trading off. Sometimes you can even try to break that barrier and then, kind of like best of both worlds and, at least go past what people think of trade-offs. And that's obviously immensely powerful. Sometimes a lot of that arises because there are innovations, right? So for instance, hard drives, right? Storage that has gone through different transitions, right? When you transition from the old hard drives, which is magnetic nature and spin-based and all that, to solid state, certain trade-offs that you may have to do in the past may disappear when certain technologies become more mature and so forth. And so that, again, creates opportunities for startups to create new products. So that's kind of like what I mentioned about trade-offs in the technology side of the world. Now, in the business side of the world, it gets very, very interesting. I would say it's more around business choices, right? What customer segments do you go after, right? So do you go after the government? Do you go after the telecom, the healthcare, manufacturing, utilities? Do you go after big enterprises, or do you go after small, medium businesses? Do you go direct? I'll go directly to the CIO, top-down sale, or you go through sort of the enterprise user, but the consumer, or small teams, and then eventually you boil out to the organizations. And those are trade-offs. So if you go after the CIO and do a top-down sale, the sales cycles can be long, the usual thing. But if you go in, maybe you have a bigger ticket size. Now, if you choose to say, okay, well, we're going to bottom up, we're going to sell to like departments and small teams, the decision is fast, right? Because of like, oh, wow, okay, this thing is great, I'll test it, and again, the decision is made, but maybe the budgets are smaller, right? And then you have to work yourself up in terms of like upselling. You have to create, all the enterprise features that a CIO wants, but you can do that later. And, then as we mentioned, different customer segments, again, very, very different, right? Selling to government, selling to the telecom, selling to healthcare, very, very, very different. And each one has different trade-offs. And it's particularly important for a startup because there's only this amount of money, this amount of people that you can hire. And then also sometimes, you have to make choices in terms of like who to hire. Your sales and BD and marketing become very specialized if you go after different segments of the market.
I find this fascinating. And I'm particularly fascinated by the idea that there are some trade-offs that are just unavoidable and other trade-offs that maybe you can innovate your way out of. One of my favorite quotes of all time is from a Vietnamese monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, who talks about dissolving false boundaries as part of the pursuit of wisdom. And the idea that many things that look like trade-offs or look like dualities, that's a limit of our perception. And so, as you said, sometimes through technological innovation, you give the example of hard drives. Sometimes the value of innovation is dissolving false trade-offs and allowing us to have the best of both worlds. That's a great aspiration, but it's also very risky to think, well, we can just innovate our way out of having to make any choices and we can do everything. And especially for a startup, as you said, there really are limits to resources. These are real choices. They are not false choices. And so there's like a wisdom or a judgment that comes in identifying which of these trade-offs we need to make just a hard decision on, and which of them we can sort of innovate and wiggle our way into getting it all. How have you seen founders develop that wisdom and discernment, and how have you developed it yourself? Where do you see it coming into play?
That's an amazing question and insight that you just brought out right there. I would say that sometimes it's really going to like challenging the assumptions. A lot of what we do, we see the world as is presented to us, or we learn to use certain technology, and that's also like given to you, and this is it. And we were not part of building it. We were not there when certain choices were made. But the innovators that love tinkering with things, they break things and they help revisit assumptions, right? And a trade-off that was done previously at least in the technology world, may disappear. And people still don't realize that because technology has moved on, right? Or like you don't care about this thing anymore. So for instance, in the areas of databases and so forth, I mean, the first databases were designed in the 70s. IBM did a lot of work there, and computers were rather unreliable then. You have to do logs here and all that, and a lot of innovation in databases continues to today because workloads are internet scale and so forth. And then so a lot of what innovators do is they go back and say, hey, let's look at some of the assumptions, if you will, or the trade-offs or the decisions that were made in the past, and then what can you give? How is the world different now if you can make the choices again? And that's how you actually break through, if you will, right? And that's why it really has to be those people who are tinkering and playing with it that goes back and say, hey, sort of asking the question of why not? Not just the whys, but why not? Why couldn't we do this, right? And so I think those are ways that I see these innovators create. They really challenge those assumptions and those decisions that we have made in the past.
What have you learned from this whole journey? You've been practicing, in the technology space for decades, in the investment space for a very long time. What have you learned from your experience that you think has more generalized applicability? What is wisdom that we can draw from your practice in technology and investing that we can apply in our lives, not just as investors, but as human beings?
As I invest in these technology startups, the business of starting a company is really hard. And it's really important for founders to be focusing on delivering a very distinctive value. And so at the end of the day, venture capital and entrepreneurship is about creating value, but distinctive value. And so if I take a step back and think about life, I remind myself every day that any situation, right? How can I bring distinctive value to this situation? What can I do to leave the world in a better way, in a distinctive way, right? It's like what other thing, based on my experience or what have you, that I can give that maybe someone else is not in the best position or has not done. I'd say that is the one thing that I really have learned, looking at founders, creating these companies, and if I were to generalize that and bring that to my life.
You mentioned you have a daughter, right?
Yes,
I have a daughter too. If you were to give advice to our daughters on how to find their distinctive value and cultivate distinctive value, what do you tell them? How does a young person uncover something special about themselves in this world of many, many people who have many, many abilities? How do you find something truly special about yourself and create that distinctive value for the world?
One of the unfortunate things that I think has happened, I don't know for how long, is that people are kind of conditioned to stop listening to the inner voice, which actually all of us had when we were young. It's that, burning question, and then we were asked to just, no, just ignore that, suppress that. You've got homework to worry about. Sometimes I look at like Charlotte learning science, and you even kind of like stamp out the curiosity, the wonder. Wonder comes from that inner voice, that somebody that's talking to you. And this is something that I couldn't emphasize more because it's actually already there. You actually didn't have to learn it. It's already there. All you have to do is to listen to it. And so this is particularly interesting for me because when I first showed up at Harvard Business School, and we are all case method and all that, the professors always start with the question, what do you think? And it's a really weird question, which is, what do you think? But then I realized why that question was asked, because it's really going to that what do you think? Not, don't tell me the answer that you are conditioned or you prepared to respond to, but what do you actually think? And so that's what I would encourage children to do. Is it's really that inner voice, and with that, then they are really observant. I mean, the innovators need to be observant, right? They are always looking at things, and it's the inner voice that tells them, I think things could be done a different way, right? And it's that inner voice.
I mean, in my own business, I often find myself, saying my business brain says this, but my heart says this, or my inner voice, has another view. And we're absolutely trained to kind of try and squash out that subjective voice and apply the cold rational logic. And I wonder whether that is one of those real trade-offs, or is that a false trade-off as well, that we should be trying to marry the two, or integrate the two, or dissolve the duality between them. If we have multiple voices in our head, is one of them true and one of them false? Is one of them, an external projection of society, or our teachers, and the other represents our true, authentic, higher self? Or is it possible that it's all us? All of our thoughts are our thoughts, and they're just different expressions that, maybe we can resolve the perceived conflicts between them with just enough time and enough tolerance for them, perhaps.
Yeah, I think this is what the author Daniel Kahneman said, right? Thinking fast and slow, or kind of like, at least directionally there is yeah, we do have that two sides of the brain, right? The slow thinking is the analytical, logical thinking, and the fast thinking is that gut, that intuition. And then we do have those two brains. Unfortunately, especially the engineers and all that, we tend to spend a lot of time more on the slow thinking. Like you deal with all the concepts and all the things that are so abstract. So you don't, it's not intuitive and all that, and then you ignore that intuition. But if you look at and you read books about how mathematicians, the real mathematicians, think, you'll be surprised that the best mathematicians use the intuitive thinking. Like, hello, you kidding me? We learn math with that slow thinking, like, step by step, and this is the formula and this is the strategy, and right. But yet the best mathematicians actually use the intuitive thinking. And I think that's what we're endowed with, that we need to use both. We need to actually use both thinking to look at every situation. We need to reconcile the differences. We need to understand the limitations, right? Certainly, even a mathematician, right? The fasting, the intuitive may give them a hunch. Oh, I think maybe you should head in this direction. But when they, write out their proofs and, all that, it's all the slow thinking they have to, right. And so it's both, I would think.
A formative experience for me was I played a lot of chess as a kid, and I would play a lot of blitz chess, and then had a, chess tutor. This is like the classic, searching for Bobby Fischer story, right? There's the speed chess in the park, and then the tutor that wants you to just like sit and study the board for 20 minutes before you make a move. And they really, it does seem like a trade-off, and yet really they reinforce each other. The fast decision making, the time pressure, it sort of forces out inspiration. It develops that intuition. You start to see things you don't even know why you see them. Your eye looks at places on the board that you wouldn't otherwise think to look, and it goes there immediately, and you can't explain why. It's very black boxy. It's a little bit like an AI. It's just like, where did that come from?
Yes.
And then but that also probably has a pretty high error rate, and the slow, kind of methodical, diligent processing helps round that out. So maybe it's about finding a way to reconcile them.
And I think it happens in business every day, right? Sort of like in a business meeting, you have executives, you do the analysis. I mean, look, you have the CFO is probably very analytical, the numbers, but when all that slow thinking is done, right? When you communicate certain decisions and what have you, it's more likely that it's the intuitive way of communicating that oftentimes, of course, you want to have the support of the facts and the numbers and the logic be watertight. But when you boil it down, it is that intuition that's like, okay, that's why we are doing this.
Do you have any practices, personal practices, for maintaining presence and balance and clear-mindedness in a world and a business that can oftentimes be distracting and stressful? How do you find a balance and a peace and a presence to apply to your work?
There are many things that I try. I guess it's different tools that pull out from the toolbox. One is of course kind of like setting aside time just for doing different things. If I want to do some like serious thinking and all that, I want to set aside time, maybe, at night when it's quiet, to be doing some reading and doing some reflection, kind of like aware that, this is how I function best and creating those times to do it. And then, of course, everybody knows this, which is, make sure you have, time to rest and exercise and all that. And that really helps the body cope with that. And then I constantly remind myself to take things in perspective, also challenge assumptions. We discussed a bit about challenging assumptions. And then also kind of like, let's try to be really taking a different perspective, right? And we all know this, perception is everything. And yet everybody has a different perspective of things, as it happens, right? It just happened. And yeah, if there are three people seeing something happen, everybody just have a different perspective. And so you kind of have like remind yourself, okay, what if you try to put yourself in other shoes and looking at the same thing? Even though, after doing that, you can still say, okay, I still think this is my choice, but it really helps challenging myself, and also hopefully, whether or not you still remain with the same decision or same opinion as before you've actually gone through that exercise, like you mentioned, so that you have composure and you are able to make those decisions that you have to make, having considered all different perspectives.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say put things in perspective. The first immediate intuitive question I have is put things in what perspective? There are an infinite number of perspectives to put things in. And again, it's, but I think you followed through with a nice answer, which is it's kind of put them in all the perspectives and then maybe come back to your own and say, has this journey, has it changed my subjective perspective at all? Do I still believe what I believe? Do I still, judge this the same way, having been around the circle? Yes. Having looked at all these other perspectives. So it's not so much about, it's almost not like you're trying to just shift your perspective. It's more like you're touring around perspectives and coming back to, inevitably, we come back to our own. Chee-We, thank you for sharing with us today. I learned so much from this conversation. I got a lot that I go back and think about. Is there any other final words of wisdom that you want to share with me, with our daughters, or with our audience?
I want to talk about AI. A lot is happening in AI, and we invest in AI, and so we follow all the innovation. We also hear the limitations and where the technology is today, and we've seen the world go through different transitions, right? And how the world economy has changed, how competition has become very very intense, and how even in the labor market, right? As we discussed, for companies to be startups to survive, they have to deliver like distinctive value, and humans have to do that as well, right? You've got to have this unique or like this experiences and these abilities that create value for others. Going forward, AI, as we understand it now, with these new innovations in foundation models and transformer models and so forth, we are in truly uncharted territory. And in the next decade, I believe these technologies will be everywhere, and it will start to create a very weird situation where a lot of information processing, if you will, things related to content, information, knowledge, will be taken over by computers, which would actually challenge what it means to be intelligent. And that's a very scary thing. That's a very scary thing because, as we discussed earlier, our children are completely not prepared for the world that is coming. And it will come in the next 5-10 years. All the school children today are just not well prepared because they are still in the mode of processing knowledge, right? We are in the knowledge economy. And so kind of like knowing things and processing things is kind of the focus. And that's the modern economy, right? But going forward, a lot of this will become automated. And it won't be perfect, by the way. My prediction is, AI is not winning, human beings because it's perfect. In fact, it will still win the human, even though it's imperfect, right? And so that really pushes us to go figure out what it is to be human, what our children must do that computers will not be able to do. And that's something, that we have to be thinking, right? And instead of worrying, oh yeah, AI is bad and take away jobs and we're going to fight AI, we should be thinking about with AI, of course, hopefully, AI is not, running amok and shooting missiles here and there and that kind of thing. But what it truly means to be human and to be focusing education and the work we do in areas that we are really creating, that we are really doing what is human, I think is what we should be, focusing our energies on. And there are many challenges that the world faces, right? Climate change, and we can go on and out on this, but that we have so much energy. And so if we just focus on what the human capabilities we have to be tackling those challenges.
It reminds me so much of the conversation earlier on distinctive value for individuals. But in this case, we're talking about a distinctive value as a species, as human. What is distinctive about human value?
Yes.
And I think the obvious or the low-hanging fruit answers that are usually given in these kind of conversations is creativity and imagination and maybe something spiritual or emotional. And you get a vision of the future human economy as, the robots are doing all the real work and we are painting beautiful paintings and, being life coaches and yoga instructors for one another. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's endgame for human productivity. But do you see anything, when you think about this deeply, when you set aside time to read and reflect and go for walks and think about, your daughter's education, do you imagine something beyond that or some manifestation of that is not so, I hate to say it, but like easily trivialized or trivializable?
I'm figuring this out. Actually, every day I think about this. I would say one of the things that I think is still human is conceptualizing. At least right now, ChatGPT, GPT-4, or what have you, doesn't conceptualize. They are very good at summarizing. They are very good at putting different ideas together, but at least I don't see AI conceptualizing things. Put it this way, right? AI can probably, if Isaac Newton had AI could have predicted how the Earth rotated around the sun in incredible, precision. But it was Isaac Newton who said, okay, there is a force, right? I don't think ChatGPT would create the word force or the concept of force the way Isaac Newton did. I'm sure ChatGPT can write about force and all of that. And so one of the things that I think is still uniquely human is that conceptualization, right? And this is not just physics, right? It's business, it's life, is about how we interact with each other. It's about politics, everything, right? And it really is the inner voice that we spoke about, looking at this thing, having that funny, what's this thing? And then us as a civilization talking about it and conceptualizing and, hopefully positive action and all of that. That is something that I think AI, I hope, cannot do still. But that's what we should be focusing our energy on, so that we are, we work together, we tackle all the challenges that the world is facing and will be facing.
I'm beaming because I'm imagining my daughter, who's 2.5 years old. I'm imagining her coming up with her first concept. It's like when we think about children speaking their first words is this big milestone. Similarly, it would be like the first time that she conceptualizes something. She takes an abstraction and gives it a name. She observes something in the universe that exists, and then from it derives something that did not exist. She makes something up that captures that. And I just think that's a really exciting idea. Chee-We, thank you again so much for this conversation. I learned so much, and I'm so excited to kind of go back and reflect on it and apply it in my own life, and think about how I cultivate the ability to conceptualize, think about how I am able to articulate a distinctive value in a world still awash currently with human competition and increasingly with AI competition, and then maybe most importantly, how we position our children to do the same, and find something truly unique about themselves, and come up with unique concepts that push us forward as individuals and as humans. I give you a lot of credit for inspiring us along that journey. So thank you so much for this chat today.
I really enjoyed chatting, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks for listening. To support, please check out the links to our sponsors in the show notes, follow me on LinkedIn, and of course, subscribe to The Essence of Investing wherever you get your podcasts. With that, I am signing off. Your happy and humble host, Jonathan Reckman. See you next time.